Hey everyone, I just want to start this Saturday Night Stories by telling everyone that I hope you've had a great week. I know it's been kind of a strange and hard week for everybody, so I hope everyone's doing well. Uh, let's just dive right into it. Tonight we're having number 9, Magic Hat. The last of my Magic Hat series, I promise. I'll stop drinking boring stuff and go to the liquor store. Maybe sometime this week. So, the number 9 is there. Not quite pale ale. This one says, originality is hard to duplicate. It is hard to duplicate. And for the part that everybody really likes. Cheers. So like I said before, this is a not quite pale ale, but it's good. I like it. I've had this one before, so I can say I like it before I even tried it. I promise. Yeah, it's very light and good. So this week I am reading a book, or part of a book that I read in high school. It was a request from Facebook. One of my, I can't call her a subscriber because she doesn't have a YouTube account, but one of my watchers messaged me on Facebook and asked me to read a Chuck Palahniuk book. And she said, you can pick the book. And I said, well, I was thinking about maybe reading Haunted, because it has short stories, and I like to do short stories on here better than just books, because I feel like you get a lot more story for the amount of time you spend with me. And so she said she wanted to request it, but wasn't really sure if it was appropriate. And I said, let's do it, why not? Come on. So I am reading from Haunted, and if you guys are familiar with the book, it is profane and disgusting and challenging at times. And so this is like your fair warning that this reading might be a little graphic. I'll probably have to say some terrible things, and that's kind of cool. The book is kind of famous for the short story Guts. It's the first real short story in the book. And it's about pegging and losing part of your colon, and I read it before, and I just can't read it. I can't do it without like laughing the whole time. And it's probably a little bit too intense for some of you guys, so I'm gonna skip it. But if you want to check that out, go for it. Nothing's stopping you. Okay, well, enough talking from me. Today I'm reading on my Kindle. I know I have the paperback of this book somewhere, but with moving around a lot, I don't know where it is. So I'm going to read 2 short stories for sure that are connected to each other. And then there's a third one that I want to read, but I'll see how time goes. The Nightmare Box, a story by Mrs. Clark. The night before she disappeared, Cassandra cut off her eyelashes. Easy as homework, Cassandra Clark takes a little pair of scissors out of her purse, little chrome fingernail scissors. She leans into the big mirror above the bathroom sink and looks at herself, her eyes half closed and her mouth hanging open the way she puts on mascara. Cassandra braces one hand against the bathroom counter and uses the scissors to snip. each long black lash falling, settling, fluttering down the sink drain. She doesn't even look at her mother reflected there, standing behind her in the mirror. That night, Mrs. Clark hears her slip out of bed while it's still dark. In the 1 hour where there's no traffic in the street, she goes naked to the living room with all the lights off. There's the rumble of springs inside the old sofa. There's the rasp and click of a cigarette lighter. Then a sigh, a whiff of cigarette smoke. After the sun's up, Cassandra's still there, sitting naked on the sofa with the curtains up and the cars going past. All her arms and legs bunched tight around her in the cold air. In one hand, she's got the cigarette burned down to the filter, ashes on the sofa cushion beside her. She's awake and looking at the blank reflection in the TV screen. Maybe she's looking at herself reflected there, naked in the black glass. Her hair looks lumpy with tangles from not combing. Her lipstick from 2 days ago, it's still smeared across her cheek. Her eyeshadow outlines the wrinkles around each eye. Her eyelashes gone. Her green eyes blink, looking dull and fake because you never see her blink. Her mother says, "Did you dream about it?" Mrs. Clark asks, "Does she want French toast?" Mrs. Clark turns on the wall heater and gets Cassandra's robe off the back of the bathroom door. Cassandra, hugging herself in the cold sunshine, sitting knees together, her breasts are pushed up by her arms. Flakes of cigarette ash are scattered on the top of each thigh. Flakes of gray ash settle into her pubic hair. Her feet twitch with tendons under the skin. Her feet flat and side by side on the polished wood floor. They're the only part of her not statue still. Mrs. Clark says, "Did you remember something?" Her mother says, "You had on your new black dress," she says. "The short one." Mrs. Clark goes to put the bathrobe around her daughter, tucking it up tight across her neck. She says, "It happened at the gallery, across from the antique store." Cassandra doesn't look away from her own dark reflection in the off television. She doesn't blink, and the bathrobe slips down, putting both her breasts back out in the cold. And her mother says, "What did she see?" "I don't know," Cassandra says. She says, "I can't say." "Let me get my notes," Mrs. Clark tells her. She says, "I think I have this figured out." It's when she comes back from the bedroom, her thick brown folder of notes in one hand, the folder open so she can pick through it with her other hand. When she looks around the living room, Cassandra's gone. At that moment, Mrs. Clark saying, "The way the nightmare box works is in the front, but Cassandra's not in the kitchen or the bathroom. Cassandra's not in the basement. That's their whole house. She's not out in the backyard or on the stairs. Her bathrobe is still on the sofa. Her purse and shoes and coat, none of them are gone. Her suitcase is still on her bed, half packed. Only Cassandra's gone." At first, Cassandra said it was nothing. According to the notes, it was an art gallery opening. There in Mrs. Clark's notes, it says, "Random interval timer." Her notes say, "The man hung himself." It started on the night all the galleries opened their new shows, and downtown was crowded with people. Everyone still dressed up from the office or school and holding hands. Medium young couples in dark clothes that wouldn't show the dirt from a taxi seat. Wearing the good jewelry they couldn't wear on the subway. Their teeth white, as if they never used teeth for anything except to smile. They were all watching each other look at art before watching each other eat dinner. It's all in Mrs. Clark's notes. Cassandra had on her new black dress, the short one. That night she wanted a long glass of white wine, just to hold it. She didn't dare lift the glass because her dress was strapless, so she kept her arms down at each side, holding her elbows close in. This flexed some muscle across her chest, some new muscle she'd found playing basketball in school. It pushed her breast so high that the cleavage seemed to start at her throat. That dress, it was black and stitched with black sequins and beads. It was a crust of rough black glitter, with her breasts pink and meaty inside, a hard black shell. Both her hands, the way she painted her fingernails, meshed together. They looked handcuffed around the stem of her wine glass. Her hair coiled and pinned up high. It was so heavy and thick, Strands and curls were coming undone, dangling, but she didn't dare reach up to fix it. Her bare shoulders, her hair coming apart, her high heels clenched the muscles of each leg, pushing her ass up, curving it out at the bottom of a long zipper. Her perfect lipstick mouth. No red smeared on the glass she didn't dare lift. Her eyes looking huge under long eyelashes. Her green eyes the only part of her moving in the crowded room. Standing and smiling in the center of an art gallery, she was the only woman you'd remember. Cassandra Clark, only 15 years old. This was less than a week before she disappeared, just 3 nights. Sitting now in the warm spot in ashes Cassandra left on the sofa, Mrs. Clark looked through the folder of notes. The gallery owner was talking to them and the people gathered around. Rand, her notes say. The owner's name was Rand. The gallery owner was showing them a box on 3 tall legs, a tripod. The box was black, the size of an old-time camera. The kind of camera where a man might stand behind, hunched under a sheet of black canvas to protect the glass plate coated with chemicals inside. The kind of Civil War camera that you took your picture with in a flash of gunpowder. A mushroom cloud of gray smoke that hurt your nose. When you first walked into the gallery, that's how it looked, this box on 3 legs. The box was painted black. Lacquered, the gallery owner said. It was lacquered black. Waxed and smudged gray with fingerprints. The gallery owner was smiling down the stiff, strapless front of Cassandra's dress. He had a thin mustache, plucked and trimmed perfect as 2 eyebrows. He had a little devil's beard that made his chin look pointed. He wore a banker's blue suit and a single earring, too big, too fake bright to be anything but a real diamond. The box was fitted along every seam with complicated moldings, ridges, and grooves that made it look heavy as a bank vault. Every seam hidden under detail and thick paint. Like a little coffin, someone in the gallery said. A man with a ponytail chewing gum. On each side of the box were brass handles. You had to hold them both, the gallery owner told them, to complete a circuit. If you wanted to make the box work right, you held both handles. You pressed your eye to the brass peephole in the front, your left eye, and you looked inside. Person after person, 100 people must have looked that night, but nothing happened. They held on and looked inside, but all they saw was their own eye reflected in the darkness behind that little glass lens. All they heard was a low sound, a clock ticking, slow as the drip, drip, drip from a leaky faucet, this little ticking from inside the smudged, black painted box. The box felt sticky with its layer of grime. The gallery owner held up one finger. He tapped his knuckle against the box and said, some kind of random interval timer. It could run a month, always ticking, or it could run for another hour. But the moment it stopped, that would be the moment to look inside. Here, the gallery owner said, Rand said, and he tapped a little brass button, small as a doorbell on the side of the box. You hold the handles and you wait. When the ticking stops, he said, you look and you press the button. On a little brass nameplate, a plate screwed to the top of the box. If you stood on tiptoes, you could read the Nightmare Box and the name Roland Whittier. The brass handles were green from people holding it tight, waiting. The brass fitting around the peephole was tarnished with their breath. The black outsides were waxed with grease from their skin rubbing pressed close. Holding the handles, you could feel it inside, the ticking, the timer, steady as forever as a heartbeat. The moment it stopped, Rand said, the push button would trigger a flash of light on the inside, a single pulse of light. What people saw then, Rand didn't know. The box came from the closed antique shop across the street. There it sat for 9 years and it never stopped ticking. The man who owned it, the antique dealer, he always told customers it might be broken or that it was a joke. For 9 years, the box sat ticking on its shelf until dust buried it, until one day the dealer's grandson found it, not ticking. The grandson was 19 years old, going to college to be a lawyer. This teenager without a hair on his chest. All day girls came into the shop to use their eyes on him. A good kid with a scholarship, playing soccer, a bank account, and his own car. He had a summer job at the antique shop, dusting. When he found the box, it was silent, ready and waiting. He took the handles, he pressed the button and looked inside. The antiques dealer found him, dust still smeared around his left eye. Blinking, his eyes focused on nothing. He just sat in a pile of dust and cigarette butts he'd swept up on the floor. The grandson, he never went back to college. His car sat at the curb until the city towed it away. Every day after that, he sat in the street outside the shop. 20 years old, and he sits on the curb all day, rain or shine. You could ask him anything, and he just laughs. That kid, by now he should be a lawyer, practicing law, but now you can go visit him in some Fleabag hotel, public housing, on Social Security, for a complete mental depression. Not drugs, even. Rand, the gallery owner, says, just a case of total crack-up. You go to visit this kid and he sits on his bed all day, cockroaches crawling in and out of his clothes, his pant legs and shirt collar. Each fingernail and toenail is grown long and yellow as a pencil. You ask him anything. How's he doing? Is he eating? What did he see? And the kid still only laughs. Cockroaches moving around, lumps inside his shirt, his head circled with houseflies. Another morning, the antiques dealer comes in and opens the shop, and the dusty clutter is different. It could be someplace that he's never been. The boxes stop ticking, that always quiet countdown, and the nightmare box sits there waiting for him to look. All morning, the dealer doesn't unlock the front door. People come and cup their hands against his window to peek inside, to look for something back in the shadows, for some reason why the shop isn't open. In that same way, the antiques dealer could have peeked inside the box to see why, to know what happened, what would take the spirit out of a kid now 20 years old, a kid with everything to look forward to. All morning, the antique dealer watches the box not tick. Instead of looking, the dealer scrubs the toilet bowl in the back. He hauls out a ladder and picks the dry, dead flies from each hanging light fixture. He polishes brass, oils wood. He sweats until his starched white shirt is soft with wrinkles. He does everything he hates. People from the neighborhood, his longtime customers, they come to the store and find the door locked. Maybe they knock, then they go away. The box waits to show him what for. It's going to be somebody he loves who looks inside. All his lifetime, this antique dealer, he works hard. He finds good stock at fair price. He carts it here and puts it on display. He wipes the dust from it. Most of his life he's been in this one store, and he's already going to estate sales and buying back the same lamps and tables, selling them for a second and third time, buying from dead customers to sell to live ones, his shop just inhaling and exhaling this same stock. This same tide of chairs, tables, china dolls, bed cabinets, little knickknacks, coming in and coming out. All morning, the dealer's eyes keep coming back to the nightmare box. He does his bookkeeping. All day he fingers the 10 key, adding machine, balancing accounts, totaling and comparing long columns of numbers, seeing the same stock, the same dressers and hat racks arrive and depart on paper. He makes coffee. He makes more coffee. He drinks coffee until the can of grounds is empty. He cleans everything in the shop until it's just his reflection in buffed wood and clean glass, the smell of lemon and almond oils, the smell of a sweat. The box awaits. He changes into a clean shirt. He combs his hair. He calls his wife and says how, for years, he's been hiding cash in a tin box under the spare tire in the trunk of their car. 40 years ago, when their daughter was born, the dealer tells his wife he had an affair with some girl who used to come in on her lunchtime. He says he's sorry. He tells her not to hold dinner for him. He says he loves her. Next to the telephone, the box sits, not ticking. The next day, the police find him. His accounts balanced, shop in perfect order. The antique dealer's taken an orange extension cord and knotted it to the coat hook on his bathroom wall. In the tiled bathroom, where any mess would be easy to clean up, he's knotted the cord around his neck and then just relaxed. He sunk down, slumped against the wall. He's choked, dead, almost sitting on the tiled floor. On the display counter in the front of the store, the box is ticking again. This history, it's all in Tess Clark's thick folder of notes. Then the box comes here, to Rand's art gallery. By then it's kind of a legend, Rand tells the little crowd. The Nightmare Box. Across the street, the antique store is just a big painted room, empty behind its front window. It was right then, that night, Rand showing them the box, Cassandra's arms bunched in tight to hold her dress up. It was that moment that someone said in the crowd, "It's stopped." The ticking, it had stopped. The crowd waited, listening to the quiet, their ears reaching out for any sound. And Rand said, "Be my guest." "Like this," Cassandra said, and she gave Mrs. Clark the tall glass of white wine to hold. She lifted one hand to the brass handle on that side. She handed Rand her beaded little evening bag, her little clutch, and her lipstick and emergency cash. "Am I doing this right?" she said, and lifted her other hand to the opposite handle. "Now," said Rand. Mrs. Clark stood there, the mother, a little helpless, with a full glass of wine in each hand, watching, everything ready to spill or break. Rand cupped his hand against the back of Cassandra's neck, the bare skin above her spine, where only a soft curl of hair fluttered down. At the top of her long, zippered ass, he pressed so her neck arched, her chin coming up a little and her lips moving open, holding her neck in one hand and her purse in his other. Rand told her, "Look inside." The box is silent the way a bomb might be the moment before it goes off and explodes. Cassandra opens up the left side of her face, her eyebrow held high, her eyelashes on that side trembling, thick with black mascara, her green eye wet and soft, something between solid and liquid. She puts her eye against the little glass in the darkness inside. The crowd around them, waiting, Rand still holding the back of her neck. One painted fingernail moves to the button in Cassandra's face, pressed to the black wood of the box. She says, "Tell me when." "The way you have to look inside, to make your face fit against the box, you have to turn your face a little to the right. You have to stoop a little, leaning too far forward. You have to hold both handles because this puts you off balance. Your weight, it has to rest against the box, pressing through your hands while balancing on your face." Cassandra's face against the black, complicated corners and angles of the old box, the way she might be kissing it. The trembling curls of her hair, the sparkling dangle of each bright earring. Her finger moves on the button, and the ticking starts again, faint and deep inside. What happens, only Cassandra sees it. The random timer starts again for another week, another year, another hour. Her face stays there, pressed into the peephole until her shoulders sag. She stands, her arms still hanging down, and her shoulders go round and sloped. Blinking her eyes fast, Cassandra steps back and shakes her face a little. Her eyes not meeting anyone's eyes. Cassandra looks around at the floor, at people's feet, her lips shut tight. The stiff front of her dress bags forward, gaping out away from her breasts, with no bra inside. She reaches out and pushes herself back from the box. She steps out of each high heel, standing flat-footed on the gallery floor. The muscles in her legs disappear. The two rock-hard halves of her ass, they go soft. A mask loose of hair hangs in her face. If you're tall enough, you can see her nipples. Rand says, "Well?" He clears his throat, pushing breath out through a long sound of spit and snot, and he says, "What'd you see?" And still not looking at anyone, her eyelashes still pointing at the floor, Cassandra reaches a hand up and plucks the earring from each side of her head. Rand reaches to give her her little beaded purse, but Cassandra doesn't take it. Instead, she hands him her jewelry. Mrs. Clark says, "What happened?" And Cassandra says, "We can go home now." And they listen to the box tick. It's a couple days later. She cuts off her eyelashes. She flopped a suitcase open across the foot of her bed and started putting things in, shoes and socks and her underwear, and then taking things out, packing and repacking. After she disappeared, the suitcase was still there, half full or half empty. Now all Miss Clark has is her notes, her thick folder full of notes about how the nightmare box must work. Somehow it must hypnotize you. It implants an image or an idea, a subliminal flash. It injects some message into your brain so deep you can't retrieve it. You can't resolve it. The box infects you this way. It makes everything you know wrong, useless. What's inside the box is some fact you can't unlearn, some new idea you can't undiscover. Days after they went to the art gallery, now Cassandra's gone. On the third day, Mrs. Clark goes downtown, back to the gallery, her thick brown folder of notes tucked under one arm. The street door is unlocked and the lights are off. In the gray light from the windows, Rand is there, sitting on the floor in a dusting of cut hair. His little devil beard is gone. His fat diamond earring gone. Mrs. Clark says, "You looked, didn't you?" The gallery owner just sits there, sprawled, legs spread on the cold concrete, looking at his hands. Mrs. Clark sits cross-legged on the floor next to him and says, "Look at my notes," she says. "Tell me I'm right." The way the nightmare box works, she says, is because the front is angled out on one side. It forces you to put your left eye against the peephole. It has a little glass fisheye lens set in a brass fitting, the same kind you'd find in anyone's front door. The way the front of the box is angled, the only way you can look at it is with your left eye. This way, Mrs. Clark says, what you see, you have to perceive with your right brain. Whatever you see inside, it's the intuitive, emotional, instinctual side of you, the right brain part that has to witness it. Plus, only one person can look each time. What you suffer alone. What happens inside the nightmare box, it only happens to you. There's no one else you can share it with. There's no room for anyone else. Plus the fisheye lens, she says, it warps what you see. It distorts. Plus, she says, the name engraved on the brass plate, the nightmare box, it tells you you're going to be scared. The name creates an expectation that you fulfill. Mrs. Clark sits and waits to be right. She sits, waiting for Rand to blink. The box stands over him on 3 legs, ticking. Rand doesn't move except his chest to breathe. On his desk, near the back of the gallery, there's still Cassandra's jewelry, her little beaded purse. "No," Rand says. He smiles and says, "That's not it." The ticking counts down, loud in the cold quiet. You can only call the hospitals, asking them if they have a girl with green eyes and no eyelashes. You can only call so many times, Mrs. Clark says, before they start to not hear you, to put you on hold, to make you give up. She looks up from her thick stack of paper, her notes, and says, "Tell me." The antique store, it's still empty across the street. "This isn't what happened," Rand says, still just looking at his hands. He says, "But this is how it felt. One weekend we had to go to a company picnic for a job he used to have. A job he hated. And as a joke, instead of food, he brought a wicker crate full of trained doves. To everyone, this was just another picnic basket. More pasta salad and wine." Rand kept the hamper under a tablecloth all morning, keeping it shaded and cool, keeping the doves inside quiet. He snuck them crumbs of French bread. He squeezed bits of corn polenta through the holes in the wicker. All morning, the people he worked with, they sipped wine or sparkling water and talked about corporate goals, mission statements, team building. At the moment when it seemed they'd all wasted a beautiful Saturday morning, that moment when all the small talk comes to an end, Rand says that's when he opened the hamper. These people who worked together every day, who thought they knew each other, as this white chaos, this storm exploded up from the center of the picnic. Some people screamed. Some people fell back into the grass. They covered their faces with their open hands. Food and wine fell. Good clothes got stained. It was the moment after when people saw it wouldn't hurt them, when people saw this was safe. It was the most lovely thing they'd ever seen. They fell back, too amazed to even smile. For the countless hours of that one long moment, they forgot everything important and watched the cloud of white wings twist up into the blue sky. They watched it spiral open, and the birds, trained by many trips, followed each other away to some place they knew every time was their real home. That, Rand says, is what's inside the nightmare box. It's something that goes beyond life after death. What's in the box is proof that what we call life isn't. Our world's a dream, infinitely fake, a nightmare. One look, Rand says, and your life, your preening and struggle and worry, it's all pointless. The grandson crawling with cockroaches, the antique dealer, Cassandra with no eyelashes wandering off naked, all your problems and love affairs. They're an illusion. What you see inside the box, Rand says, is a glimpse of the real reality. The two people still sitting there together on the concrete gallery floor. The sunlight from the windows and the street noise, it all feels different. It could be somewhere they've never been before. It's right now. The ticking from the box, it stopped. And Mrs. Clark was too afraid to look. The next portion that kind of picks up after the same story is called Poster Child, a story by Mrs. Clark. 3 months after Cassandra Clark disappeared, she walked back. A morning commuter driving inbound on the state highway saw a girl limping, almost naked, along the gravel shoulder. The girl seemed to be wearing a dark loincloth and dark gloves and shoes. She had on some kind of bib or a black handkerchief tied around her neck and hanging down to cover her chest. By the time the driver had turned around his car and phoned for the police, by then the sun was bright enough to see the girl was actually naked. Her shoes and gloves, her loincloth and bib were just dried blood, dried thick and black and swarming, buzzing, busy with black flies. The flies crawling on her thick as black fur. The girl's head was scraped and scabbed. Ragged tufts of hair sprouted behind the girl's ears and around the crown of her bare head. She limped because the 2 small toes had been amputated from her right foot. The bib, that layer of blood on her chest, that fur of flies. At the hospital emergency room, the doctors swabbed it with alcohol and found a game of tic-tac-toe carved in the skin above her breasts. The ex-player had won. When they swabbed her hands, they found the smallest finger missing from both. On the rest of her fingers, the nails had been pried up and torn away, leaving the fingertips swollen and purple. Under the dried blood, her skin was blue-white. The girl's face was the bony knobs of her chin, her cheekbones, and the ridge of her nose. At the temples and above her jawline, the skin sagged into shadowed holes. Inside the curtained walls of the emergency room, Mrs. Clark leaned over the chrome rails of her daughter's bed and says, "Baby, oh my sweet baby, who did this to you?" Cassandra looked and laughed at the needle stuck in her arms, the clear plastic tube stuffed into her veins, and she said, "The doctors." "No," Mrs. Clark said, "who cut off her fingers." And Cassandra looked at her mother and said, "You think I'd let someone else do this to me?" Her laughter stopped, and she said, "I did this to myself." And that was the last time Cassandra ever laughed. The police, Mrs. Clark said, they found evidence. They found slivers of wood, thin as needles, embedded in the walls of her vagina and her anus. The police forensics people dug slivers of glass out of the cuts on her chest and arms. Mrs. Clark told her daughter that not talking wasn't an option. They needed to know every detail Cassandra could remember. The police said that whoever had done this would kidnap another victim. Unless Cassandra could face her fear and help them, her attacker would never be found. In bed, in the sunlight from the window, Cassandra lay propped up on pillows and watched birds soar back and forth in the blue sky. Her fingers wrapped big in white bandages. Her chest padded with bandages. Her pencil hand only moved to draw the birds, flying back and forth, a sketch pad propped against her knees. Mrs. Clark said, "Cassandra, honey, you need to tell the police everything. If it would help, a hypnotist would come to the hospital. The caseworkers would bring anatomically detailed dolls to use in the interview." And Cassandra still watched the birds, sketching them. Mrs. Clark said, "Cassandra," and put her hands over one of Cassandra's white wrapped hands. And Cassandra looked at her mother and said, "It won't happen again." Looking back at the birds, Cassandra said, "At least not to me." She said, "I was a victim of myself. Outside in the parking lot, the television news crews were setting up their satellite feeds, each van aligning the broadcast dish on its roof, ready for the toss from the studio anchor. The on-location talent holding a microphone and inserting an IFD in her ear. For 3 months, the town where they lived had stapled posters to telephone poles, each poster showing a photo of Cassandra Clark in her head cheerleader uniform, smiling and shaking her blonde hair. For 3 months, the police had questioned kids at the high school. Detectives had interviewed people who worked at the bus station, the train station, the airport. The local television and radio stations ran public service announcements that gave her weight as 110 pounds, height 5'6", green eyes, and shoulder-length hair. Search and rescue dogs sniffed her cheerleading skirt and followed a scent trail as far as a bus stop bench. State troopers in power boats dragged every pond and lake and river within a day's drive. Psychics phoned to say the girl was safe. She had eloped and gotten married, or she was dead and buried. She was sold into white slavery and smuggled out of the country to live in the harem of some oil magnate. Or she'd had a sex change and would be coming home as a boy soon. Or the girl was trapped in a castle of some kind. Or some kind of palace, locked inside with a group of strangers, all of them cutting themselves. The psychic wrote 2 words on the sheet of paper and sent them to Mrs. Clark. Folded inside the paper, the shaky pencil lines said, "Writer's Retreat." After 3 months, all the yellow ribbons that people had tied to their flag antennas were faded to almost white, flags of surrender. Nobody paid much attention to the psychics. There were so many of them. For every Jane Doe the police found, burned or rotted or mutilated beyond identification, Mrs. Clark held her breath until dental records or DNA testing showed she wasn't Cassandra. By the 3rd month, Cassandra Clark was smiling and shaking her hair on the side of milk cartons. By then, the candlelight prayer vigils had stopped. The reward fund at the local bank branch was only part of the case still drawing any interest. Then, a miracle, she was limping naked along the highway. In her hospital bed, her skin looked purple with bruises. Her head was shaved bald. The plastic band around her wrist, it said, C. Clark. The county medical examiner swabbed her for penis cells, which he said are long-shaped and like the round-shaped vaginal cells. They swabbed her for semen. The team of detectives vacuumed her scalp and the hands and feet for foreign skin cells. They found fibers of blue velvet, red silk, and black mohair. They swabbed the inside of her mouth and cultured the DNA in petri dishes. Police counselors came and sat by her bedside, saying how important it was that Cassandra talk out all her pain, that she speak her bitterness. The television and radio crews, the people, the newspaper, and magazine reporters sat in the parking lot, shooting their stories with their hospital window in the background. Some stepping back to film crews, filming her window, to show what a circus this had become, as if that was the final truth. When the nurse brought sleeping pills, Cassandra just shook her head no. Just by shutting her eyes, she fell asleep. After Cassandra wouldn't talk, the police fell on Mrs. Clark, telling her about the total cost to the taxpayer for their investigation. The detectives shook their heads and said how angry and betrayed they felt, working this hard, caring this much about a girl who didn't give a rat's ass about the pain and hardship she was causing her family, her community, and her government. She had everyone weeping and praying. Everyone hated the monster who tortured her, and they all wanted to see him caught and put on trial. After all their searching and effort, they deserved that much. They deserved to see her on the stand weeping while she described how the monster had cut off her fingers, carved her chest, shoved a wood stake up her starving ass. And Cassandra Clark just looked at the detective lined up alongside her bed. All their faces and all their hate and rage focused on her because she wouldn't hand over another target, a bona fide real demon, the devil they needed so bad. The district attorney threatened to sue Cassandra for obstruction of justice, her mother, Mrs. Clark, among those glaring faces. Cassandra smiled and told them, "Can't you see? You're addicted to conflict." She says, "This is my happy ending." Looking back to the window, the birds flying past, she says, I feel terrific. Still, in the hospital, she asked for a goldfish in a bowl. After that, she lay propped up in bed watching it swim around and around, sketching it, the same way her mother watched program after television program every night. The last time Mrs. Clark went to visit, Cassandra looked away from the fish only to say, I'm not like you anymore, she said. I don't need to brag about my pain. And after that, Tess Clark didn't visit. And now, Footwork, a story by Mother Nature. Don't laugh, but in aromatherapy, they warn you to never light a lemon cinnamon candle at the same time you light a clove candle and a cedar nutmeg candle. They just don't tell you why. In feng shui, they never let on, but just by putting a bed in the wrong spot, you can focus enough qi to kill a person. You can give a late-term abortion with just acupuncture. You can use crystals or aura work to give people skin cancer. Don't laugh, but there are back alley ways you can turn anything new age into a killing tool. Your last week in massage school, they teach you never to work the transverse reflex zone at the heel of the foot. Never touch the arch of the left foot dorsum, and especially not the outermost left aspect. But they don't tell you how come. This is the difference between therapists who work the light side versus the dark side of the industry. You go to school to study reflexology. It's the science of manipulating the human foot or heel, or to heal, or stimulate certain parts of the body. It's based on the idea that your body is divided into 10 different energy meridians. Your big toe, for example, it's connected straight to your head. To cure dandruff, you just massage the little spot behind your big toenail. To cure a sore throat, you massage the middle joint of the big toe. This isn't the kind of healthcare covered by any insurance plan. This is like being a doctor, but without the income. The kind of people who want the space between each toe rubbed to cure brain cancer. They don't tend to have loads of money. Don't laugh, but even with years of experience manipulating people's feet, you'll still find yourself poor and rubbing the feet of people who never made income their top priority. Don't laugh, but one day you see a girl you went to massage school with. This girl, she's the same age. You wore beads together. You two braided dried sage and burned it to cleanse your energy field. The two of you were tie-dyed and barefoot and young enough to feel noble while you rubbed the feet of dirty, homeless people who came into the school's free practice clinic. That was years and years ago. You're still poor. Your hair has started to break off at the scalp. From poor diet or gravity, people think you're frowning whether or not you are. This girl you went to school with, you see her coming out of a posh midtown hotel. The doorman holding the door open as she sweeps out her swinging furs and wearing high heels that no reflexologist would ever strap on her feet. While the doorman is flagging her a cab, you go close enough to say, "Lentil?" The woman turns and it's her. Real diamonds sparkle at her throat. Her long hair shines thick, heaving in waves of red and brown. The air around her smells soft as roses and lilacs. Her fur coat, her hands in leather gloves, the leather smooth and pale and nicer than the skin on your own face. The woman turns and lifts her sunglasses to rest the crown on her hair. She looks at you and says, "Do I know you?" You went to school together. When you were younger, the doorman holds the cab's door open. And the woman says, of course she remembers. She looks at her wristwatch, blinding bright with diamonds in the afternoon sun, and says, in 20 minutes she needs to be across town. She asks, can you ride along? The two of you get into the back of the cab, and the woman hands the doorman a $20 bill. He touches his cap and says it's always such a pleasure to see her. The woman tells the cab driver the next address, someplace a little farther uptown, and the cab swings into traffic. Don't laugh, but this woman, Lentil, your old friend, she loops one fur coat arm out the handle of her purse. She snaps the purse open, and inside is stuffed nothing but cash money. layers of $50 and $100 bills. With a gloved hand, she digs into these and finds a cell phone. To you, she says, "This won't take a minute." Next to her, your Indian printed cotton wrap dress, wrap skirt, your flip-flop sandals and brass bell necklace don't look chic and ethnic anymore. The kohl around your eyes and the faded henna designs on the back of your hands to make you look like you never take a bath. Next to her diamond stud earrings, your favorite dangling silver earrings could be thrift store Christmas tree ornaments. Into the cell phone, she says, "I'm en route." She says, "I can take the 3 o'clock, but only for a half hour." She says goodbye and hangs up. She touches your hand with a soft, smooth glove and says, "You look good. What are you doing lately?" "Oh, the same old, you tell her, manipulating feet. You've built a good list of repeat clients." Lentil chews her bottom lip, looking at you, and she says, "So you're still into reflexology?" You say, "Yeah, you don't see how you'll ever retire, but it pays the bills." She looks at you as the cab goes a whole city block, not saying a word. She then asks if you're free for the next hour. She asks if you'd like to make some money tax-free doing a 4-handed foot manipulation for her next client. All you'd have to do is 1 foot. You've never done reflexology with a partner, you tell her. 1 hour, she says, and we'll get $2,000. You ask, "Is this legal?" And Lentil says, $2,000 each. You ask, "Just for a foot massage?" "Another thing," she says, "don't call me Lentil." She says, "When we get there, my name is Angelique." Don't laugh, but this is real. The dark side of reflexology. Of course, we knew some aspect of it. We knew by working the plantar surface of the big toe you could make someone constipated. By working the ankle around the top of the foot you could give them diarrhea. By working the inside surface of the heel you could make someone impotent or give them a migraine headache. But none of this would make you money, so why bother? The cab pulls up to a carved pile of stone, the embassy of some Middle Eastern oil economy. A uniformed guard opens the door and Lentil gets out. You get out. Inside the lobby, another guard wands you with a metal detector, looking for guns and knives, whatever. Another guard makes a phone call from a desk topped with a smooth slab of white stone. Another guard looks inside Lentil's purse, pushing aside the paper money to find nothing but her cell phone. The doors to an elevator open and another guard waves you both inside. Lentil says, "Just do what I do." She says, "This is the easiest money I'll ever make." Don't laugh, but in school you'd hear the rumors about how a good reflexologist might be lured away to the dark side, to work just certain pleasure centers on the sole of the foot, to give what people only whispered about, what giggling people would call foot jobs. The elevator door opens into a long corridor that leads to only one set of double doors. The walls are polished white stone, the floor stone. The double doors are frosted glass and lead to a room where a man sits at a white desk. He and Lentil kiss each other on the cheek. The man behind the desk, he looks at you but talks only to Lentil. He calls her Angelique. Beside him, another set of double doors open into a bedroom. The man waves the two of you to go through, but he stays behind, locking the doors. He locks you inside. Inside the bedroom, a man lays face down on a huge round bed with white silk sheets. He wears silk pajamas, shiny blue silk, and his bare feet hang off one edge of the bed. Angelique tugs off one of her gloves. She takes off the other glove, and you both kneel in the deep carpet and each take a foot. Instead of a face, all you can see is his grease-combed black hair, his big ears fuzzed with tufts of black hair. The rest of his head is sunk into the white silk pillow. Don't laugh, but the rumors are true. By pressing where Angelique pressed, by working the genital reflex zone on the plantar side of the heel, she had the man moaning, face down in his pillow. Before your hands are even tired, the man is bellowing, soaked in sweat, the blue silk pasted to his back and legs. When he's silent, you can't even tell if he's breathing. Angelique whispers, "It's time to go." The man at the desk gives you each $2,000, cash. Outside on the street, a guard flags a cab for Angelique. Getting into the back seat, Angelique hands you a business card. It's under the phone number for a holistic healing clinic. Under the number, handwritten, it says, "Ask for Lenny." The soft velvet glove of her hand, the roses of her perfume, the sound of her voice, it all says, "Call me." People have a lot of reasons they get into giving foot jobs. The idea that you can give your family a better life. You can give your mom and dad a little comfort and security. A car, maybe. A condo on the beach in Florida. They say the day you gave your folks the keys to that condo, that was the happiest day of your life. That day, they cried and admitted they'd never thought their baby would ever make a living just by rubbing people's stinky feet. That's a day you'll pay for the rest of your life. Don't laugh, but it's not illegal. You're just doing a simple foot manipulation. Nothing sexual happens except your client has an orgasm that leaves them too weak to walk for the next couple of days. Men or women, it doesn't matter. You work the right spot on their feet and they come as hard as the seizure. So hard there's a smell when they lose control of their balls. So hard most clients can only look at you, drool running out of one corner of their mouth, and motion with a trembling finger for you to take the stack of $100 bills on the dresser or the coffee table. Lenny calls from the clinic and you get on a chartered flight to London. The clinic calls and you fly to Hong Kong. The clinic is just Lenny, a guy with a Russian accent who lives in a suite in the Parkhampton Hotel, and who you give half your income to. It's Lenny's accent on the phone telling you what flight to catch, what hotel room, or what private island where the next client is waiting. Don't laugh, but the downside is you never have time to go shopping. The money just piles up. Your uniform is a fur coat. To fit into this new world, you get good gold and platinum jewelry. You keep a head of perfect, glossy hair. Sitting in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, you might see a few kids you went to reflexology school with, now wearing Armani suits, Chanel cocktail dresses. Kids who used to be vegan bicycle commuters, now you see them climbing in and out of limousines. You see them eating alone at small tables in hotel dining rooms, drinking cocktails at the bar in private airports, waiting for the next chartered jet. What used to be idealistic dreamers now turned into professional footwork. These hippie, dreadlocked earth monsters and goateed skater punks, you hear them on the telephone giving sell orders to their stockbrokers, stashing money in offshore accounts and Swiss safety deposit boxes, haggling over uncut diamonds and Krugerrands. Boys named Trout and Pony, Lizard and Oyster, now they're all called Dirk. Girls named Buttercup are all called Dominique. This flood of people doing footwork, it brings the price down. Soon enough, instead of software billionaires and oil sheiks, you're loitering in a hotel bar, wearing your last year's Prada and turning foot tricks for $20 a pop. You're slipping under tables to manipulate the feet of conventioneers sitting at restaurant back booths. You're bursting out of big fake birthday cakes to do the feat of whole football teams' bachelor parties just to keep up payments on your parents' retirement home. It's just a matter of fact before you come in contact with some incurable footnail fungus under your silk-wrapped French manicure. You do all this just to pay the interest on the money you borrowed from Lenny and his Russian mafia. Money borrowed to buy stocks that tanked, stocks recommended by Lenny, or to buy jewelry and shoes Lenny said you'd need to fit in. You're in the lobby bar at the Parkhampton Hotel, trying to talk to a drunk businessman into a $10 foot job in the men's room. That's when you see her, Angelique, walking across the lobby headed for the elevator. Her hair shining, her furs dragging on the carpet behind her high-heeled feet. Angelique still looking great. Your eyes catch her, and with one white-gloved hand, she waves you over. When the elevator comes, she says she's going up to Lenny's penthouse suite, the clinic. She looks at you in your scuffed high heels, your fingernails chipped and jagged. She says, "Come see what the next growth industry will be." The elevator stops on the 50th floor, the whole penthouse leased to Lenny, where two pinstriped suits full of muscle stand guarding a door. It's these goons you pay Lenny's cut to. Half of everything you make. One guard says your name's into a microphone pinned to his lapel, and the doors unlock with a loud buzz. Inside, it's you and Angelique and Lenny. Don't laugh, but lonely and isolated as your life is, doing footwork, Lenny's life looks worse. Locked up here in the penthouse floor wearing a white terry cloth bathrobe all day, counting his money and talking on the telephone. The only furniture is a desk chair, the seat stained and dirty, the mattress is flopped near walls of glass that look out over the whole city. On the computer screen, stock prices scroll up without stopping. Lenny comes to the both of you, his bathrobe hanging open, wearing wrinkled striped boxers. White socks turned yellow on his feet. And then he reaches both hands towards Angelique's face and says, "My angel, my favorite." He cups her hand in his face and says, "How are you?" In her high heels, Angelique must be a head taller than him. She smiles, saying, "Lenny." And Lenny smacks her hard, one hand across her face, and he says, "You're cheating on me." That's how you are. He holds one hand up, the palm open and ready to smack her again, and Lenny says, "You're taking outside assignments, aren't you?" Holding one gloved hand against her cheek, hiding the red print of Lenny's hand, Angelique says, "Baby, no." And Lenny drops his hand. He turns his back to her. Lenny goes to look out the windows, the city spread out right next to his mattress. "Baby," Angelique says, "let me show you something new." Angelique looks at me. She goes to stand next to him, putting her gloved hands on his shoulders from behind, and Angelique says, "Let mommy show you how much she still loves her baby." She steers Lenny to sit on the mattress, then to lie back. She slips the yellowed sock off each of his feet. "Come on, baby," she says. Taking off her gloves, she says, "You know I give great foot." It's funny because, like, even foot is great is italics. Then Angelique does what you've never seen before. She gets down on her knees. She opens her mouth, lips stretched wide and thin, runs her tongue across the bottom of Lenny's soul. Angelique cups her lips around Lenny's heel, and Lenny starts to moan. Don't laugh, but there's jobs worse than the worst job you can imagine. A media mogul with no history of high blood pressure. He's found dead of a stroke in the room of the Four Seasons. A rock star in perfect health dies of kidney failure after a foot massage in the Chateau Marmont. We have access to the feet of presidents and sultans, CEOs and movie stars, kings and queens. We know how to make a paid hit look like natural causes. This is what Angelique tells you on the way down in the elevator. After Lenny moaned and thrashed, after Angelique mouthed his foot, until the one long moment Lenny sat up on the mattress, clutching his chest in both hands and gaping his mouth at her, still sucking on his heel. After his heart stopped, Angelique pulled up the bed sheets to his chin. She wiped the lipstick off his foot and smeared some more around her mouth. She unplugged his phones and told the guards Lenny was taking a long nap. On the way down in the elevator, Angelique tells you this was her last foot job. This kind of foot hit paid $1 million cash. A rival agency had hired her to bump off Lenny, and now she was out of business for good. In the lobby bar, you two have a cocktail to get the taste of Lenny's foot out of her mouth. Just one last goodbye drink. Then Angelique says to look around the hotel lobby. The men in suits, the women in fur coats. They're all Rolfing killers, she says. Reiki killers. Colonic irrigation assassins. Colonic, sorry. Angelique says, in gem therapy, just by putting a quartz crystal on someone's heart, then an amethyst on his liver and a turquoise on his forehead, you induce a coma that results in death. Just by sneaking into a room and rearranging someone's bedroom set, a feng shui expert can trigger kidney disease. Moxibustion, she says, the science of burning cones of incense on someone's acupressure points. It can kill. So can shiatsu. She drinks the last of her cocktail and takes off the strand of pearls around her neck. All those cures and remedies that claim to be 100% natural ingredients, therefore 100% safe. Angelique laughs. She says, cyanide is natural, so is arsenic. She hands the pearls to you and says, from now on, I'm back to being lentil. This is how you want to remember Angelique, not the way she looked in the newspaper the next day, fished out of the river in a soggy mink coat, her earrings and diamond watch taken to make it look like a robbery, not with her feet fondled to death, but dead the old-fashioned way, with a hollow-point bullet to the back of her perfect French braid, a warning to all the Dirks and Dominiques who might jump ship. The clinic calls, not Lenny, but some other Russian accent trying to send you to clients, but you don't trust them. The guards saw you with lentil. Up at the penthouse, they must have another hollow point ready for the back of your head. Your folks call from Florida to say a black town car keeps following them, and somebody calls to ask if they know how to find you. By now you're already running from flophouse to flophouse, giving back alley foot jobs for enough cash to stay alive. You tell your folks, be careful. You tell them not to get massaged by anybody they don't know. Calling them from a payphone, you tell them to never mess with aromatherapy, auras, Reiki. Don't laugh, but you're going to be traveling for a long time, maybe the rest of your life. You can't explain, and by now you've run out of quarters, so you tell your folks goodbye. So that was interesting, right? And I was happy to read this per Delaney's request. I'm not sure that I mentioned her name earlier. Her name is Delaney. I hate Delaney. And the book is really fun, as you can see. So I hope you enjoyed the reading. Maybe you got some laughs from it, or maybe you just enjoyed reading with me. So I'm hoping that you'll join us next time on Saturday Night Stories. If you have a request, you can send me a Facebook message, or you can send me a YouTube message. YouTube inboxing has been kind of wonky lately. So I would say the safest way to contact me is probably Facebook message. You can, see that I've read your message at least. And so if you do have a request, I suggest doing it that way. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Good night.